All right, Shalom. For start by saying all praise to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Kakadash, double honors to the elders and apostles that rule well, and salutations to the brothers that's doing the truth and sincerity. Now, this is a quick little lesson on some information I was just looking up. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it. This is misinformation. And it says misinformation is false and inaccurate information. Examples of misinformation include false rumors, insults, and pranks, while examples of more deliberate disinformation include malicious content such as hoaxes, spear phishing, and computational propaganda. News parody or satire may also become misinformation if it is taken as serious by the unwary and spread as if it were true. It says the terms misinformation and disinformation have been associated with the neologism fake news, defined by some scholars as fabricated information that mimics news media content in form but not in organizational processes or intent. And the news pushes out misinformation and disinformation, and a lot of these people have misinformation and disinformation in their minds, especially during the time that we're living in, because Esau has created these think tanks to push out this propaganda to help forward their war agenda, or whatever political whatever agenda that they want, to be forwarded, man. I should have started with this one first, but because this is what's going on in the news media, and it's going on heavy. That's why it's so much stuff in the media. You gotta know how to decipher it. This is propaganda information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. And like I said, that's what's going on with this whole war situation. They've already passed laws where they can use propaganda, against the U.S. people, and also to counter the news that's coming from these other countries. And other countries do use propaganda and everything. From what I have been reading, I'm not gonna get into specifics because I got to do more research behind it. But also, I know the U.S. uses it heavy, and they passed legislation to where they can counter the news that's coming from these other countries. But we know that the U.S. media is a propaganda machine, is a misinformation machine, is a disinformation machine designed to keep the people asleep, and to keep the world asleep, for that matter, for in that case, because a lot of people watch the U.S. news. A lot of it's true, some of it's true, and majority of it's fake. So you have to decipher, which brings me to this book. This is called The Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, Shaping the Moral, Spiritual, Cultural, Political, and Economic Decline of the United States. It's by the author of The Committee of 300, Dr. John Coleman. This is on page 89, chapter 18. It says Wilson forces. Hold on, stop here. It says Wilson forces the U.S. into World War I thanks to propaganda. The massive modern propaganda techniques, which have become a familiar part of particularly the American and British governments, began with World War I, 1914-1918. It says, from the beginning of the war, both German and British propagandists worked hard to win sympathy and support of the United States. It says German propagandists appealed to the many Americans of German descent and to those of Irish descent who were traditionally hostile to Great Britain and who were living in America. The propaganda was rather crude by today's standards, but what it lacked in finesse was made up by the sheer volume of the huge output of the Wellington House. And I'm going to look up the Wellington House real quick. It says Wellington House is the more common name for Britain's War Propaganda Bureau. Oops, lucky. Which operated during the First World War from Wellington House, a building on Buckingham Gate, London, which was the headquarters of the National Insurance Commission before the war. It says the bureau, which operated under the supervision of the Foreign Office, was mainly directed at foreign targets, including allied nations and neutral countries, especially until 1917, the United States. The building itself has since been demolished, and its former site is now occupied by a block of flats. Where's the point that I hit? It says in August 1914, after discovering that Germany had a propaganda agency, David Lloyd George, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, however you say it, was given the task of setting up a British War Propaganda Bureau. Lloyd George appointed the writer and fellow Liberal MP Charles Masterman to head the organization, whose headquarters were set up at Wellington House, the London headquarters of the National Insurance Commission, of which Masterman was the chairman. It says the Bureau began its propaganda campaign on the 2nd September 1914, when Masterman invited 25 leading British authors to Wellington House to discuss ways of best promoting Britain's interests during the war. Those who attended, including William Archer Hall Caine, Arthur Conan Doyle, Arnold Bennett, John Masefield, G.K. Chesterton, Henry Newbolt, John Galsworthy, Thomas Hardy, Gilbert Parker, G.M. Trevelyan, and H.G. Wells Rudyard Kipling had been invited to the meeting but was unable to attend. It says all the writers who attended agreed to maintain the utmost secrecy, and it was not until 1935 that the activities of the War Propaganda Bureau became public knowledge. Several of the writers agreed to write pamphlets and books that would promote the government's point of view. These were printed and published by such well-known publishers as Hodder and Stockton, Methuen, Oxford University's Press, John Murray, Macmillan, and Thomas Nelson. The War Propaganda Bureau went on to publish over 1,160 pamphlets during the war. On the first significant publications to be produced by the Bureau was the report on alleged German outrages in early 1915. This pamphlet documented atrocities, both actual and alleged, committed by the German army against Belgian civilians. A Dutch illustrator, Louis Raymakers, provided highly emotional drawings which appeared on the pamphlet. It says one of the Masterman's early projects was a history of the war to be published as a monthly magazine, for which he recruited John Buckham to head its production. published by Buckham's own publishers, Thomas Nelson. The first installment of the Nelson History of the War appeared in February 1915. A future 23 editions appeared regularly during the war. Buckham was given the rank of second lieutenant in the intelligence corps and provided with the necessary documents to write the work. General headquarters staff saw this as very good for propaganda, as Buckham's close relationship with Britain's military leaders made it very difficult for him to include any criticism about the way the war was being conducted. Yeah, you brothers can continue to look into it, but I'm bringing this out to say this, to make this statement too. That's what they're doing now. They promoting a whole lot of propaganda. A whole lot of books have been coming out since a lot of the prophecies have been coming to pass, of everybody's perspective and whatnot, and which a lot of it is, you got some truths in it, a lot of it's lies, a lot of it's being pushed to help for an agenda, and want to keep people sleep, ultimately. But this is going on heavy right now during this time. But okay, I'm gonna go back to the book. It says the propaganda was rather crude by today's standards, but what it lacked in finesse was made up by the sheer volume of the huge output of the Wellington House. It says soon, however, Germany was virtually cut off from direct access to the United States. Thereafter, British propaganda had little competition in the United States, and it was conducted more skillfully than that of the Germans, who had no equivalent of Wellington House, Bernays, or Lippmann. Once engaged in the war, Woodrow Wilson organized a Committee on Public Information, an official propaganda agency, to mobilize American public opinion. This committee proved highly successful, particularly in the sale of Liberty bonds, and no wonder its program was written for the White House by Tavistock and was largely directed from London. So, they use a lot of propaganda on the people, man. This is the next point. It says the propaganda aspects of World War II were similar to those of World War I, except that the Second World War, also started by Britain and financed by the international bankers, was greater in scope. Radio played a major role, with news broadcasts always a mixture of facts heavily laced with fiction. Propaganda activities overseas were more intense. The Tavistock Institute was able to put into practice all of the valuable lessons it had learned in 1914-1919, and it used its experience in a number of new ways in the old as well as new countries, and it's being used all over again right now today. They got a lot of experience from these wars that the bankers have created, and they're using it now for this World War III, but ultimately it's still of the spirit, because we're at the end of Esau's kingdom, man, and we know that because, one, the prophets are out there, two, be bringing down Esau's lies. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with them two scriptures there. This is Joel chapter 3, verse 1 says, "For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem," and that's what you see going on through the spirit of Yahweh Shema Shai, starting from their elders on down. The Lord started to bring us back, man, you know, to him by way of the truth. I will also gather all nations and will bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And the propaganda machine is in full effect. The misinformation, disinformation, it's always been in effect, but it's on another level now than it was before because of the wars and stuff that's kicking off. You know, and that's what the book was stating, that they used it heavily to push, get to shape people's minds and to fit their agenda, you know, to help bring about this war because they're going to need people to fight, you know, and a lot of people not in agreement with fighting, but enough of this propaganda, whatnot, being used on them, you're going to convince them because it's called gradualism that they use, and there's a couple other terms, you know, but gradualism is one of them, concupiscence. But yeah, it says, verse 2, it says, "I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel." Right, that's why all the nations are gathered over there in the Middle East, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 9. "For I think that the Most High has set forth us, the apostles, last, meaning at the last times, man, as it were appointed to death," right? So the prophets and the apostles, the disciples, the preachers, the teachers, those of us that's out there doing the will, Yahweh is our way of the elect, we were sent out there. And that's what the people are witnessing, you know, because it's the end times, man. It says, "For we are made a spectacle unto the world and to angels and to men." And a lot of people take us as a joke, you know, but ultimately what we're saying is true. And Jake and I'm not going to wake up to the end, so, or to the last minute. That's the way the Lord got it set up, you know. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 6, verse 6. It says, "Then did I consider these things, and they were all made through me alone and through none other. By me also they shall be ended, and by none other." Right? "Then answered I and said, What shall be the parting asunder of the times, or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth?" And all it's speaking on is the end of Esau's world and the beginning of Jacob's world, man. And it's not talking about to end the planet, you know, stuff of that nature. It's just the transfer of power, the transfer of the kingdom. Esau and the rest of the nations, Esau, just to keep it in context, his kingdom was being took from him. America and all the kingdoms that he run now is going to get took from him by Yahweh Shai when he comes back. And the Israelites, the blacks, lands, and Native Americans are going to be put in power because the world was made for our sakes. It says, "And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau." And all that's saying is the Lord's men that come from that line of the blacks, lands, and Native Americans of the 12 tribes of Israel are pulling down the lies that Esau, the white devil, the Edomite, the Caucasians have pushed out. It says, "For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth." It says, I'm jump just to 2nd Ezra chapter 6, verse 58. "But we thy people whom thou hast called thy firstborn," which is the Israelites, "thy only begotten, and thy fervent lover are given into their hands, right? We in our captivity. We are not free." It says, "If the world now be made for our sakes," because it was made for us, Why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? How long shall this endure? Right. So, us not possessing an inheritance, or us being in captivity, is going to end. And it's been manifest in the front of the world's face, via prophecy. But okay, jump to these other couple scriptures. This is Micah chapter 2 verse 1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds, right? So destruction to Esau, the Edomite, man. He devised iniquity. He using this propaganda machine to help push his agenda. His misinformation, his disinformation to help kick off these wars, but it's still through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. And a lot of people know that these wars are lies and wicked, so to speak. A lot of them people still go out there because they ain't got no money. They got families to support or what have you will, whatever reason they might have. But that's just to prove that the propaganda machine, the misinformation, disinformation is working. The gradualism, all of that is working. And this information also is located in the book Satan Angels Exposed. It says, when the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. They covet fields, right? And Esau has took over people's lands and take them by violence, right? Through killing them off, killing people off, starting with the blacks, Native Americans, because we are the it's been the agenda to keep us down. We are the main people in the storyline, so to speak. It says, and they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage, with the laws and legislations that they pass, with the institutionalized racism, etc. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, against this family do I devise an evil, from which ye shall not remove your necks. So even though that they set these machines up to promote this war, and so they can go into this war and take the resources from the Middle East and establish the new world order and push out the RFID chip, it says that, therefore thus saith the Lord, behold, against this family do I devise an evil, from which ye shall not remove your necks, neither shall you go haughtily, for this time is evil. Right, they ultimately gonna get a judgment behind doing it, man. And that's America gonna be destroyed, and then to further that, the elites that survive are going to be put in slavery. The people that survive that are not of the 12 tribes of Israel are going to be put in slavery, man, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 6. It says, and you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. And we see that going on in the news media now. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So everything that's happening in the news media is supposed to be happening. It's the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai that got it happening. Esau doesn't have any real control, because the Lord directs a man's steps, man. So all this is happening because it's Bible prophecy. I'm pressing buttons. This is I'm gonna end it off with this scripture because Esau was given a task to do what he's doing. This is Revelation chapter 6, verse 4. And there went out another horse that was red, and this represents Esau. And power was given him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. Now the whole earth is not ain't in peace right now. And that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. Esau has that sword, man, which he's using to start these wars, man. So yeah, I'm gonna just end it off at that. Call all Yahweh Shai. About Shema Crocodiles, double honors to the apostles and the brothers that's doing the truth and sincerity. And Shalom.